Sure, here's a gripping, suspenseful introduction for your YouTube story. I always thought my aunt was just a little different. She wasn't the type to talk much about herself, and there was always this quiet mystery around her. You know how some people just have this vibe, like they're carrying something heavy, but they'll never let you in on it. That was her. She was kind, always there when I needed her. But at the same time, there was this wall, something she didn't want anyone to see. And for years, I never questioned it. Until one day, completely by accident, I stumbled onto something that changed everything. It all started when I was helping her clean out the attic. She had been saying for months that she needed to get rid of old stuff, but every time she brought it up, she found an excuse to put it off. This time, though, she actually let me help. At first, it was just dusty boxes, old clothes, and random junk she had collected over the years. But then, tucked away in the farthest corner, there was this old wooden chest. It looked ancient, like something out of a movie, heavy, locked, and covered in scratches. When I asked her about it, she froze. I mean, completely froze. Her face went pale, and for a second I thought she was going to tell me to stop right there. Instead, she laughed it off, saying it was just old memories and not worth digging into. But something in her voice didn't sit right with me. It was the way she said it. Too casual, too rehearsed, like she had told this lie before. And that's when I knew. Whatever was inside that chest, it wasn't just old memories. It was something she didn't want anyone to find. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My aunt had always been secretive, but this was different. This was a reaction I had never seen from her before. I told myself to let it go, to respect her privacy. But curiosity has a way of eating at you, doesn't it? The next day, when she went out for a few hours, I found myself standing in front of that chest again. My heart was pounding. I knew I shouldn't, but I had to know. I searched around the attic, hoping, no, praying, that I'd find a key. And then, in one of the drawers of an old desk, I found it. A small rusted key that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. My hands were shaking as I slid it into the lock. For a moment, I hesitated. Was I really about to do this? But before I could talk myself out of it, I turned the key. The lock clicked. The lid creaked open. And what I saw inside made my blood run cold. This setup leaves the audience eager to find out what's inside the chest while keeping the story engaging and full of suspense. Let me know if you'd like any tweaks. Inside the chest, there were stacks of old papers, faded photographs, and a few small objects that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. My hands were shaking as I picked up one of the photographs. It was black and white, edges curled from age, and in it, I saw my aunt, but she looked younger, maybe in her 20s. She was standing next to a man I didn't recognize. There was something strange about the way they stood together. Not like a happy couple, not like close friends. There was a stiffness, a tension. The man's expression was unreadable, but my aunt, she looked almost nervous. I set the photo aside and grabbed one of the papers underneath. It was a letter, written in messy handwriting that I didn't recognize. The ink had smudged in places, but I could still make out some of the words. My heart started pounding as I read the first few lines. It was a goodbye letter. Someone was leaving. Someone was scared. And my aunt's name was right there in the middle of it. I rifled through the rest of the chest, my mind racing. More letters, more photographs, some with my aunt, some with people I had never seen before. There was a small velvet pouch at the bottom, and when I opened it, a thin silver ring fell into my palm. It was simple, worn down with time, but I had this strange feeling that it meant something. Suddenly, I heard the front door open. My aunt was back. My stomach dropped. I scrambled to put everything back exactly how I found it. my hands fumbling with the letters and the photographs. I forced the chest shut just as I heard her footsteps coming up the stairs. My heart was racing so fast I thought she'd hear it. She stepped into the attic and looked at me. "What are you doing up here?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes flickered toward the chest for just a second. That was all it took. She knew. I swallowed hard. "Just looking around," I said, trying to sound casual. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, watching me. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "Some things should stay in the past." I nodded, pretending I didn't know what she meant, but the truth was, I had already seen too much, and now I couldn't stop wondering, who was that man? What was in those letters? And why did my aunt look so afraid in that photo? I wanted to let it go. I tried to let it go. But that night, lying in bed, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I had uncovered something big, something my aunt had been hiding for years. And I had a feeling I wasn't supposed to find out. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph. My aunt's face, frozen in time, that uneasy expression. And the letters? Who wrote them? What were they afraid of? I wanted to ask her to just come right out and say, I knew something was wrong. But deep down, I had a feeling she wouldn't tell me the truth. Maybe she couldn't. The next morning, I tried to act normal. At breakfast, my aunt was quiet, stirring her coffee in slow circles, staring at nothing. I watched her, wondering if she knew I had opened the chest. Had she noticed something out of place? Was she waiting for me to slip up? My heart pounded every time she glanced in my direction. I needed answers. If she wasn't going to tell me, I had to find them myself. Later that day, while she was out running errands, I went back to the attic. My hands trembled as I opened the chest again, this time more carefully. I pulled out another letter, reading each word like a puzzle piece. "I don't think we should meet anymore. It's not safe. They're asking questions." My breath caught in my throat. They? Who was they? And why did this sound like something straight out of a crime novel? Then I saw it. An old newspaper, folded at the bottom of the chest. The headline made my stomach drop. A missing persons case. A man who had vanished decades ago. My eyes scanned the article, and then I saw the photo. My hands turned ice cold. It was him. The same man from the picture with my aunt. The same one she had never mentioned, never talked about. And now, according to this newspaper, he had disappeared. I heard the front door creak open downstairs. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stuffed everything back into the chest, shut it, and stepped away just as her footsteps started up the stairs. She was coming, and this time, I wasn't sure I could hide what I knew. The footsteps grew louder. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would give me away. My aunt stepped into the attic, her eyes scanning the room. For a second, I was sure she knew. I forced myself to stay still, to act like I had just been looking around. "What are you doing up here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Just curious." Her eyes flickered to the chest. A tiny movement, barely noticeable, but I caught it. She knew. Maybe she didn't know how much I had seen, but she knew enough to be on edge. She took a slow step forward, her fingers tightening around the edge of the wooden chest. "Curiosity isn't always a good thing," she said quietly. There was something in her voice, something almost pleading, like she needed me to drop this, to walk away before it was too late. But I couldn't. Not now. I swallowed hard. Who was he? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. I didn't have to say his name. She knew exactly who I meant. Her expression didn't change, but I saw the way her breath caught for just a second. She sat down on the old wooden chair by the window, staring out at nothing. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Finally, she sighed. "There are things you don't understand," she said. "Things that don't need to be dug up." I took a shaky step forward. "But he disappeared, and you knew him. You were with him." She closed her eyes like she was bracing herself. Then, without looking at me, she whispered, "Some people are meant to disappear." A chill ran down my spine. What did that mean? Did she make him disappear? Was she protecting someone? Or was she afraid of whoever had been involved? I didn't know what scared me more. The thought that my aunt was hiding something dark, or the possibility that she had been running from something all these years. And then, for the first time since I had opened that chest, I realized something terrifying. If she had kept this secret buried for so long, what would she do to keep it that way? A heavy silence filled the attic. My aunt sat still, her fingers gripping the arms of the chair like she was holding herself together. I wanted to push her for answers, to demand the truth, but something in her expression stopped me. She wasn't just hiding something, she was afraid of it. Then, something clicked in my mind. If she had been keeping this a secret for so many years, maybe I wasn't the only one who had started digging. What if someone else had been looking too? What if someone already knew? I swallowed hard. Does anyone else know? My voice was barely above a whisper. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes sharp. Why would you ask that? The reaction was too quick, too defensive, and that's when I realized someone had been looking, maybe even recently. Before I could ask another question, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting when I saw the notification. An unknown number, a single message. "You shouldn't have opened that chest." The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in. My breath came in short, shaky gasps. This wasn't just about some old letters and photographs. Someone was watching. Someone knew I had found them. I looked up at my aunt, my hands trembling as I turned the screen toward her. "Did you tell anyone?" My voice cracked. "Did someone else know I was up here?" She stared at the message, her face draining of color. Slowly, she shook her head. "You need to stop," she whispered, "right now, before it's too late." But it already was too late. The house suddenly felt different, like we weren't alone. My aunt moved quickly, walking past me and locking the attic door. Her hands shook as she turned the key. That's when I saw it. The way her body tensed, the way her eyes darted toward the window. She knew who sent the message. She knew what this was about. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't actually know my aunt at all. My aunt's hands were trembling as she locked the attic door. My heart pounded in my chest. Whoever sent that message, whoever had been watching, was out there, and my aunt knew exactly who it was. I stepped closer. "Tell me the truth," I demanded. "No more lies, no more secrets. What happened to him?" She exhaled sharply, her shoulders sinking like she had been carrying this weight for too long. "I tried to protect him," she whispered. "I tried to protect both of us." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Protect him? From what? From who? Before I could ask, a noise echoed from downstairs, a slow, deliberate knock at the front door. My aunt's eyes widened in terror. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me away from the window. "We can't answer it," she hissed. The phone buzzed again. Another message: "Open the door or I will." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about some old mystery. This was happening now. I turned to my aunt. "Who is it?" She hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then finally, she whispered, "The man in the photo." My breath caught. "But he disappeared." She shook her head. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. The knocking grew louder, more forceful. My aunt looked at me with desperate eyes. We have to leave, now. But before we could move, the attic door burst open. A gust of cold air rushed in as a tall figure stepped inside. My body went rigid. He was older now, his face hardened by time, but I recognized him instantly. The man from the photographs, the man who had supposedly vanished decades ago. And then he spoke. I never disappeared. I was hiding. His gaze locked onto my aunt. But you knew I'd come back for you. My aunt's grip on my wrist tightened. You don't understand, she whispered. But I did, and in that moment I realized the biggest secret wasn't what happened back then. It was what was about to happen now. The room felt like it was closing in around us. My aunt stood frozen, gripping my wrist so tightly it hurt. The man who was supposed to be gone, stared at her with an expression I couldn't read. Was it anger? Fear? Regret? My voice came out in a shaky whisper. Why did you hide? He exhaled, his gaze flickering to me for the first time. Because I had to. His eyes darkened. And so did she. I turned to my aunt, but she wouldn't look at me. The weight of her secret, of their secret, was suffocating. Then finally, she spoke. I helped him disappear. Her voice was barely audible. Because if I didn't, he wouldn't be alive right now. A chill ran through me. The letters, the fear in her eyes, the years of silence. It all made sense now. Someone had been after him, and she had been the only one who could save him. He took a step forward. But I can't run anymore. My aunt clenched her jaw, her body tense. Then neither of us will be safe. A long silence stretched between them. It was like they were speaking without words, locked in a battle only they understood. And I stood there, caught between the past and the present, realizing that my aunt had spent her entire life protecting something I had never even known existed. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. It's over, isn't it? He nodded. It has to be. And just like that, the years of hiding, of secrets, of fear, it all came crashing down. My aunt didn't say another word. She just reached for my hand and squeezed it, like she was silently telling me it was time to let go. We left the attic together, stepping away from the past and into whatever came next. The truth had finally come out, and even though it had changed everything, I knew one thing for sure. Some secrets aren't meant to stay buried, but some should never be uncovered at all.